Savior suffered pain and agony. He bore it all, that I might live. He broke the bonds of sin and set the captive free.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that
I with Him might live. I stood condemned, He took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. They placed a crown of thorns upon my Savior's head. He bore it all, that I might live. My cruel man with spear, His side was pierced and bled.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that
I with Him might live. I stood condemned, He took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. Up Calvary's hill in shame, the blessed Savior trod. He bore it all, that I might live. Between two thieves they crucified the Son of God.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that
I with Him might live. I stood condemned, Jesus took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that
I with Him might live. I stood condemned, but Jesus took my place.
He bore it all, that I might live.
In His presence live.
Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away,
got to fly away
to a home on God's celestial shore.
I'll
fly away,
got to fly away.
Oh, I'll
fly
away,
got to fly
oh
away.
glory,
I'll fly
away,
got to fly away.
When I die, hallelujah,
Oh,
by and by, I'll fly away,
got to fly away.
Just a few more weary days and then, whoa, I'll fly away,
Got to fly away.
to a land where joy shall not end.
I'll
fly away,
Got to fly away.
yes,
I'll fly away.
fly away,
Got to fly
oh,
away.
glory,
I'll fly away.
fly away,
Got to fly away.
I said when
I
die, hallelujah,
Oh, hallelujah, by and by.
I'll fly away,
Got to fly away.
oh, I'll fly away, oh glory,
I'll fly away.
got
to fly away.
Yes, and when
I
die, hallelujah,
Oh, hallelujah, by and by.
I'll fly away,
Got to fly away. Fly away.
Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you worry there's a victory to win? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be free from your passion and your pride? Power in the blood, power in the blood. Come for a cleansing to Calvary's side. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder.
everybody. Welcome to SALT, Seeking a Living Truth, and happy Sabbath.
Yeah, happy Sabbath. We're glad to be here. We're glad to be inside with the air conditioning around here. 107 out today.
We have the air conditioning on, really? I couldn't tell.
No, this is why he's wearing a sweatshirt. He turns it down to cold, and I'm meandering around because it's summer, right? Don't I look like it's summer? And he puts on a sweatshirt.
That's just, it's hot in here now. Anyway, we have a basic fundamental difference in personality. I like fans, and Miranda doesn't.
I like them sometimes.
I like them blowing, like, on me, and cool tropical breezes, and she uses them for noise control.
It's just that, when you're trying to think and write and such, then you just block out noise.
It's funny how things change, because, like, in college, high school even, college stuff, I did that too. I needed a fan running so I could hear it, and it's just kind of that white noise. And somewhere along the line, I just got to where almost any noise will keep me up. I wasn't going to tell a story, but since I brought it up, when I lived in Madison, in Nashville, I was in an apartment. It was on the second floor, I think, second or third floor. And one night there was this constant, it wasn't loud enough to be a clanging, but it was a constant click, click, clang, clang kind of sound. And I mean, anybody else probably wouldn't even heard it, and it was just keeping me up. And it was probably 2 a.m. I finally got up, went downstairs, outdoors, looking for this thing, and it was, I think it was a piece of wire or a coat hanger that they had tied around a drain pipe, like a rain runoff pipe from the roof to hold it in place. And the wind was blowing just enough that it was just clicking the side of the, tin pipe.
Wow, it just doesn't seem like that would be that noisy.
It really wasn't, but I could hear it, and as soon as I heard it, that's all I could hear.
Yeah, and it is true, some tones are more irritating to the eardrums.
And it's the whole, don't think about it, but you're trying to think, don't think about that thing that you're thinking about right now, and it's a deadly, eternal cycle of madness. And it's like being thrown into the multiverse of madness, and I had to go stop the little, and I remember twisting it and turning, and finally I got it completely off the thing and went back to bed. And then I was too frustrated about it to go back to sleep, so I don't know that I accomplished anything. So that's our message for today. Don't get frustrated at the little things. Anyway, so it's been fun. We're actually running on a little bit different of a system here today. We may sound different, so let us know if it's, too soft or loud or something for you. Because we're shooting a little mini movie up in Granbury, Texas for the risk management people. It's a fun little video. But I left most of our production equipment up there. So today I was like, oh no, how are we going to do this? So I pulled out an old microphone that we're using, and Miranda's going to desperately try to be loud enough.
Yes, I am going to yell at everyone today because that's just what I'm going to do. Yes.
My booming voice should not be any problem, but Miranda sometimes, when I'm louder, she's a little softer, and so we have to, like on the soundboard that we usually have, I'm like at a 3, Miranda's at a 10, and then but it's her nice, soft, soothing voice that gets me through the hard patches of life.
Aww.
See, I just come up with that stuff just like that. Speaking of coming up with stuff.
Oh, we're introducing what we're talking about today?
That was a segue right there.
Okay, right there.
That's a segue.
Yeah, okay. So last week in Sabbath School, if you guys are studying the Sabbath School Quarterly, it was about the Psalm 23. And so we did talk about that last week. Not that we're basing our stuff on Psalm 20 or on the Sabbath School Lesson Quarterly, but sometimes ideas pop out. And so wherever they're at, we just use them at the moment. Mm-hmm. So while they were talking about it, a couple mentioned a couple of things that I thought about on occasion, but I never thought about it far enough to give myself a satisfactory answer about it. So basically she said, well, sometimes you get off the path of righteousness, right? And you're meandering around this way, and then you meander, and then there's another meander, and eventually you get yourself back on the path of righteousness. And then her husband threw in later, he said, well, there's a possibility that maybe the wrong path is actually the right path. And so anyways, I had kind of satisfied the first one at one point in time for myself, because the Lord's Prayer says, lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. And that, of course, is Jesus on the path of righteousness leads us into places where we can be tempted, right? And
you can do it.
I can. All of a sudden, like, my brain just went for a walk or something. But anyways, yeah. So Jesus has us there on the path of righteousness. The temptation happens on the path of righteousness, in the valley of the shadow of death, where the enemy is, that we can't see them, but he's tempting us anyways. But Jesus is there with his cup that runneth over for us, and with the anointing our head with oil, and with the table that he prepares for us in the valley of the shadow of death. And so I kind of have a hard time with the idea that we are actually, once we've committed our life to God and committed to serving him, that we actually meander off the path when bad things are happening. That's God leading us into the valley of the shadow of death, which is on the path of righteousness, right there in Psalm 23. It doesn't say it's a different path. It just, you're on the path of righteousness, and sometimes it's going to seem like a detour, but it's not.
It isn't. It's all part of the plan, as they say in Veggie Tales. He's honking. It's all part of the plan. It's Larry Boy, if you need the reference. But the Old Testament, like the entire Old Testament, is God's lesson to us about how not to screw up. And here's the examples of the children of Israel. Don't do what they did. That's the entire Old Testament. Because that's a good example of, thinking you're on a detour, you're somewhere, but you're still actually on the very path that God wants you to be on. So, for instance, they come out of Egypt, right? So Moses leads them out of Egypt, and the first thing they run into is the Red Sea. And immediately they're all like, oh, you brought us out here to die, But that's exactly where God wanted them to be. Now, to them, it looked like, well, this was a mistake. But in God's plan, it was like, no, this is it all along. I'm trying to teach you something. And so he takes them through the Red Sea, and he destroys the Egyptian army. And yay, rejoice, yay, God is great, he's going to take care of us, woo. And then a few days later, we're running out of water. And they're like, oh, God hates us, you brought us out here to die. And Moses is like, ugh, did we not learn anything? And so we have the water from the rock. And that actually happens several times. He has water from the rock. And the first time, if you read it, it's really kind of interesting that, God is pretty gentle the first time. He's like, I want you to know that I'm taking care of you, and so you will trust me. I'm going to bring water from this rock, and out comes the water. And a few days or a few weeks later, same thing happens again, and they all like, oh, we're all going to die. God hates us, he's going to destroy us. He brought us to the wilderness to kill us. And the next time God talks to them, he's a little more, it's interesting the way it's worded, he's a little stronger. He's like, so let's all remember, I'm revising, let's all remember what happened last time. I brought you water, so you will learn and know that I'm your God and you will trust me. And then, sure enough, a third time, and then there's manna. And at that point, God is like, get the point. This is why you're out here. I'm not hiding the plan here. I put you here and brought you to these places so you would see me provide for you and know that I am your God and I'm going to take care of you. Get it? And yet they wandered all this time, went to the promised land, and still didn't learn the lesson, because then and there, obviously, Joshua and them, they went in, they saw the land, they watched the grapes famine, and then, oh, we can't go in, there's giants in the land, they're going to squash us, and then Joshua said, no, we can do it, God is with us, and they all said, you shut up, and so they went back into the wilderness. And this is Revised Standard Brett Bible, and but it's an on concept. Every step of the way was where they were supposed to be. God was taking them through those experiences to get them ready to go into the promised land, and brought them to the edge, gave them the opportunity, knowing they wouldn't take it. God still gave them the opportunity, you know. He opened the door for them to walk in, knowing they wouldn't, because all of that was preparing their children, who then would remember that later so they wouldn't make the same mistake. It was all part of the overall big picture plan. So what looked like a detour, a delay, we got off, that was actually God taking them exactly where he wanted them to be to teach them the things he wanted to teach them. It's up to us whether we learn it or not.
Right, which Brett just answered the age-old question. If you read ahead in your Sabbath School lesson, next week it starts out on Sabbath afternoon's study guide, that does God lead us into places and experiences that will cause confusion and hurt? Brett just answered that for us. So I'm going to give a little more of a modern day example maybe. Mm-hmm. So let's say, you're driving down the freeway and all of a sudden there's barriers across there and it says road closed for construction and detour over this way.
So if you're my dad, you take that as a challenge. I bet I can get around that detour.
Well, I'm sure some people do. And how did that work out for him?
Well, it was interesting because this is when I was a kid, and they were just built. If anybody watches from North Carolina or knows the road between Mount Pisgah Academy and Columbia, South Carolina, you go through the mountains. There's a nice highway there now. It's called Saluda Grade. But at the time, when we were going up to visit my uncle who lived in Asheville, they were just building it. And they had the it used to be you had to get off at that very place where that highway was being built, and you had to go through the mountains on a back road, which was fun, I thought, as kids. But they were building this highway, and because my dad was who he was at the time, he thought, that's for other people. And he goes,
the rules are always for other people.
Yeah. So he went around the barrier, and he started going up. It was still gravel, and they were still working on it. But he was in we had this big Lincoln Continental, so he looked like, and he was a contractor. He built houses, not highways. And he would just, go up, and as he passed the workers, he would just, you're like, all right, good, da-da-da. And the one time he got slowed down where they had to stop because they were dump trucks, because somebody came over and talked to him. And they said, and they rolled the window down, and Dad was like, okay, so you get all and he had some terminology that he knew from building houses. He was like, all right, I'm checking on the grading for the gravel before they pour the, tar. He's like, oh yeah, we're on schedule. We're going to be done. He's like, because we got to get this. Like, yeah, we're going to be good. We'll actually be early. All right, keep it up. And he goes, okay, yes sir. And then off he goes. Just faked it all the way through,
People didn't think it was unusual he was taking his family with him
I
on
guess
his
not.
word.
I guess
his
not.
wife and the kids.
And
I mean, suitcases in the back.
Well, you couldn't see the suitcases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just us in the car. So,
okay.
Yeah, that was my dad.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have an analogy to that at some point.
Well, it was going around the barriers.
Right.
It just made me think of that. So.
Right.
Because I would never do that while
Right.
she's in the car.
No. I mean, no.
I wanted to be honest and clarify that.
Yeah. No. So anyways, now you have to take a detour. And, you've planned it out. This straight ahead is the right way to go, right? I mean, you did it on MapQuest or whatever, and that's the right way to go. And yet
You know that still exists, MapQuest?
We used it in geography class.
Is that not? I learned that the other day. MapQuest. That's used to go. It used to be the thing, and you punch it in, you print off the maps.
Yes.
It was cool.
Yes.
I thought it was dead. With Google Maps and Apple and Siri and everything. It's still a thing.
Okay, so wherever you go to find directions these days,
there you go.
You have figured it out, and that's the straightaway path to get there. But now you're on the detour. But in reality, which one is the right road? This road is closed. Do we not say God closes doors and opens doors for us? Mm-hmm. So this, where we think we should be going, is closed, and that is not then the way to go. It is the detour that is the right way to go. Yep. And so now the freeway, like I said, was clearly the right way to go, representing all the ways we think we should live and do things. So all the classic good things and all the right good things to do. All the ways we think we should be living and all the ways we think that other people should be living. And when it doesn't fit into that category, we think we're on the wrong road. And yet that's not really true, because that is like the Israelites. God took them on the detour, and that was the right way to go.
That makes me think of the job search before we got here.
Yeah, that was a trip or
'Cause
two.
there were several times where it
Yes.
looked like that's the clear road.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
going to happen.
There was at least 3 people, 3 times
Mm-hmm.
that Brett was told by the main guy, not even just some little lackey or whatever. There was at least 3 times that he was, "You're the man.
You're it.
You're the guy, man.
You're
We're just gonna talk to the board or whatever. You're in."
You're in.
And then all of a sudden,
Roadblock.
yeah, he wasn't.
Detour sign.
Yes, yes.
Like,
so,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And it was one after the next.
Yeah, they like for the first almost 6 months.
6 months.
He got nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there was those 3
Yeah.
that was just like, oh, well, good thing because severance pay is about running out, so we're going to get a job right on time. And yeah, but all God's detours. And then when he applied for this job, it was...
I didn't even think about it. I wasn't going to. She made me.
Yeah, he wasn't going to apply for it because he's like, I'm not qualified
I
for
did.
that.
I'm not qualified. That's important to remember.
He said that.
I am not qualified.
I said, 1, you would enjoy the job.
Yeah.
2, you're qualified for part of it.
Part of it.
And 3, you never know if you aren't the most qualified person who's going to apply.
Turns out I get down here and Mr. Not Qualified. So how would you feel about being chair of the department?
chair of the department. Not just teaching classes
Yeah.
that, but how about you run this department you think you're not qualified
Yeah.
to?
I still think they were just desperate enough to get him. He'll say yes.
Yes, but it was when the original chair first interviewed Brett.
Yeah.
He didn't even have his other job offer yet.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until just a day or 2 before Brett was interviewed that he received another job offer and took it because it was what he really
He
wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it's
You never
all-
know. All those places
Yeah.
we thought we were in a detour. Well, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And this one's like, well, there's no way because I'm not even close to qualified. And now you're in charge. It's like, oh, well, could not have called that one.
Yeah. Well, for anybody who's listening, he clearly is qualified enough.
Enough. Enough. Yes.
Yes. So, okay. So Brett put in a story he wanted me to tell here.
Oh, this is a good story.
Speaking of going around
the
barriers,
Yes.
sometimes it doesn't work out so well. It happened to work out for Brett's dad that one time. But this story, I was out shopping a year or 2 ago in Lincoln. I was on my way home from running my errands. And they were doing some road construction and taking it down to 1 lane instead of 2. Well, they had the barriers up, the little stick things or whatever that they had, the tape or whatever runs along there. And clearly it was closed. You should not be getting into this lane. Well, there was a reason you should not be getting into that lane because they hadn't just put a little pavement on top. It's like they dug up the whole thing and they had literally put in new pavement that was clearly fairly deep because someone got in a hurry. They decided that the people ahead of them weren't moving fast enough. And so they gunned their car, turned over, and there they sat, sunk down into newly poured cement.
Yeah, they tried. So they didn't think it was going fast enough, so they came around, went around the barriers, and went into where they thought it was just finished pavement, and then
it looked safe.
Yeah.
And it looked like a good place to go, but it was not. And so therefore,
you got stuck in tar.
Yes.
So the moral of the story, the parable, it looked safe.
It did.
It looked inviting.
Uh-huh.
It was brand new pavement.
It
This
looked
is the
like
way,
the way to go.
And yet, as soon as they took their first little bit of steps into it, they sunk deep into the mire and stickiness of the tar of sin.
Well, of tar of pride in one way. I mean, sometimes we look at we do good works for the sake of looking good.
Yeah.
And that's a miry pit.
Yeah, that wasn't just driving out of. Their car was, their wheels and everything were ruined.
Their wheels
The
were ruined.
undercarriage,
And
they were in
yeah.
bad.
And it was a nice car, too.
Being the operative.
Yeah, it was. It's true.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Moving on. So this last week, I'm not quite sure why it happened. I hardly feel qualified to be asked that, outside the fact that I had experience and these people had not had experience with it yet. But a couple of people actually asked for my advice on how to transition from parenting your kids, your underage kids, and now they are suddenly young adults, and they legally are old enough to make their own decisions and such. And yet, one person was concerned that yes, their kids were graduated, yes, their kids had good jobs, but they wanted to just guide them in the right path, and it felt like maybe it wasn't, their kids weren't moving along quite along the path of righteousness, like they wanted them to. And
see, I'd be like, they're gone, it's party time, when they call you up, it's like, that sounds like it sucks for you, but it's really not my problem. I love you, God be with you.
I don't think so.
They are adults now. It's like, I raised you, you can make good decisions, let me know what you decide.
Yeah, I kind of pointed out that, when we were the same age, that where were we on that path, basically? And we need to consider that it's all a journey, and that it's, while it may look like a detour to us, and we think the path of righteousness for them is going along right here, we don't know how God put up the roadblocks for them and took them off on the detour, and we may feel that they are succumbing to temptation and whatnot, but this is all a learning experience. Look at how the Israelites were that first time there at the Red Sea. Oh, they wanted to go back and be slaves in Egypt again. It was better than dying out there in the desert. And yet God, what did he do? He just loved them. He loved them, and so that was... I'm not sure I offered really, really good advice to either of the people.
No, I thought it was good.
That asked me, but in retrospect, I would have to say that we should follow Jesus' example and just love them where they are at, because I remember, my son, he was only a sophomore in high school at that point in time, but it was highly, highly, highly unusual that he actually failed a couple classes that year. I mean, this coming from a kid who never failed to turn in his homework and always did his best work, and everything was done early and such. And for whatever reason, he kind of flubbed a little and just didn't pass a couple classes. And so I told him, I guess you'll just have to retake those classes next year. And that was it. And yet, his dad, who we were recently divorced at that point in time, he chewed him up. That's what my son said. He said, well, Dad just chewed me up one side and down the other of it and really got mad at me. And he basically said, I really appreciate your approach to it, but I wasn't too worried about it, because that wasn't his usual behavior and such. So,
we have Aspen, and okay, so Aspen didn't have the best grades this year to start with, and she had C's, and to some parents that would be like, what are you doing with C's? And I just remember,
honestly, I could get all A's, and my mother said I could do better.
Could do better?
Yes.
My dad was thrilled if I got like a D+. No, but I remember those horrible moments when we got our report cards and we would sit down, and Dad would just the same way, for whatever he would just really ream us about it, and it was horrible. And so one of the things that's like, well, I'm never going to get bent out of shape over grades so much, because myself, honest confession, this is literal. I passed high school with the lowest GPA you could get and still pass. And I did the same thing in college. I graduated, but with the absolute lowest GPA you could have and still graduate. And look at me today. And don't follow this example. But, Aspen came in. She had C's. She passed. She had A's and B's and She had a couple C's. But the way, it's funny, she did the same thing I did in academy. I don't think I told her this. At my academy, boarding school, you could get down to the last 2 weeks or even week of school and do all your back assignments at once and hand in this stack of papers, which she kind of did at the end. And I think she ended up with what did you end up with?
Mostly A's.
Mostly A's.
A couple B's.
One B and one C. And it's like, oh, great,
Yeah,
And being a teacher, grades to me are so not the best, accurate reflection of what you learn. It's a letter grade based on percentage points. It does not take life experience into consideration. But this is not an educational seminar, so I'll move on. It's just that what you were talking about when you were talking about that stuff is perspective. You look at stuff and what happens to you when you're 16 and 17 and 21 and 22, and then look at us now when we're over 40. You have
40
perspective. Are we not over 40?
We are.
I am not lying.
Not lying, no.
So, and then you have perspective. You look back and you think, man, those things were so big deals back then. Really weren't.
It's true.
And that's one of the things, like when you're giving that advice, it's like, you don't know. These are things that God actually may be taking them through, but
Right.
making them, forging their personality and character, creating. In recovery, we have to say, every day you're exactly where God means for you to be. And it's because that part of your journey is an integral part of making you who you are going to be. And so, like, I think it's a saying where you are not the person you are today. You're the person you were a month ago or 2 months ago, because the things you did then are what's making you who you are today, and the actions you take today are going to be forming the person you're going to be. So the person you are today is the person you were in the past making those decisions, and that's how God teaches us and creates us and moves us along these paths that sometimes we think are detours and delays, and we certainly shouldn't be on but it might be the desert that God brought us into, because he took the children of Israel into the desert. He took Moses into the desert before he was a leader. He took Elijah.
Why don't you just take them to the mountains?
Yeah, just go to the mountains or the beach.
Yeah.
The beach is the same as the desert, but with water. And he took Elijah into the desert for a purpose. He took Jesus into the desert for purpose. Mm-hmm. And so the desert is not a detour necessarily. It could be the place God takes you for a very specific reason.
Right, that you need to go there and learn things.
Learn something.
So, yeah. So, on the path of righteousness, God is revealing to us who he is. Yeah. And which also reveals to us who we are. An example of what we talked about recently, when Mary poured out the perfumed oil onto Jesus' feet, it revealed her love for him. Mm-hmm. And this pure love was the truth serum that revealed who everyone else in that room was. And basically, the people who said this should have been sold and given to the poor, Jesus let that go on for a bit. He let the people talk like that for a bit. No doubt long enough to prove to the people who they were and where their hearts really were. Then he said, let this woman alone. She has expressed her love for me. And you will always have the poor with you, but you're not always going to have me with you. So Jesus was pointing out how a love relationship with him was the most important, and Jesus was calling them to follow him. So a love relationship, should not a love relationship with our kids be the most important thing? They can know our standards. Mm-hmm. We don't have to shout that out to them and chew them out every time they did something wrong.
Well, we do have to shout it out today, because the microphone is over there.
Shout it out.
Shouting out today.
Yes.
Yeah. But you said the loving relationship. Isn't that what the whole journey in the wilderness for the children of Israel was? It's learn to trust me.
It was God revealing who
himself.
he was, and ever present, always there, willing to take care of them, always providing for them. Mm-hmm. And absolutely. And I think, And
that's the same thing, like you're saying, loving relationship with each other, with our kids, our cats if you have them. Even cats deserve love.
Yes. So you're going to talk about your first 2 years in college?
Well, that's kind of the illustration of what I just said.
You did that already.
I didn't. It's the point I was making. The things you do, are experiences that make you who you are. For instance, you look at me today, and you would never guess the kind of person maybe you would.
Okay.
Years ago, my first 2 years at college in Southern, I was in high school. There was two things. I was pretty resentful at different points in my life because my brother and my sister kind of got most of the attention growing up. And, when it kind of boiled over in me, my parents were like, we're so sorry. It's just that you're the one we never had to worry about. You were always happy. You were always, having fun and making jokes, and you just were a good kid, and we didn't have to worry about you. The other two, were they're, a complete mess. We had to deal with them. But, well, neither one of them watched this. So they were a complete mess. So, and they would apologize, like, we just didn't think we had, you were just good. We didn't have to worry about you. And so, like, through Pisgah, like through Academy, I was like the class pastor, and I was SA pastor, and I was religious activities leader, and all this stuff. And then my first 2 years in college, I just swung the other way. And it was probably because my parents divorced right after my senior year, after I graduated that summer, and all this stuff came exploding to the surface, and all this resentment, all this like junk from all that came up. And so I distinctly remember how I got into the whole drug and drinking scene. Of all things, I ended up with a roommate at Southern of a guy I had actually been at Pisgah with. He was a year ahead of me. And at Pisgah, he was known to be, one of the party guys. And here we were, thrown together by fate. And because he was living in the basement in the dorm, and they condemned it, of all things. And so they had to move everybody out. And he asked me, because I was like the only person there he knew. He said, "Hey, Brett, can I room with you?" And I didn't have a roommate at the time, which I loved. And he caught me on the way to class. And I said, I don't know, let me think about it. And then when I got back, he was moved in. And it was interesting, but he and his other friend from Pisgah, who was a druggie, they would go out and drink every night and do marijuana, just drink and smoke. And I got left in the dorm. And I just remember it was just sheer boredom. One night I just said, "I'm going with you." And now they knew me from Pisgah. Well, this is the senior class pastor, it's the SA pastor, and they wouldn't take me. They were like, "No, you are not going," because they didn't want me to get into it. And I think that went on for a couple of weeks. And finally they said, I said, "Look, we can take my car." And my car had dark black tinted windows, which I guess is perfect for the party mobile because you couldn't see in. So off we went. And that's how I got into the whole 1 year was mostly drugs. Well, no, first year was mostly drinking. The second year was mostly drugs. So it was 2 years of that. And there's a whole other story about how God kept me from getting kicked out of Southern so I could come back after a year away. I went off to task force. But I remember that summer, I was going to camp to be a counselor, and I was just like, I can't do this. I can't be drink and do drugs and be a camp counselor. So I said, well, no more of that. And that was it. For me, it was easy because it wasn't, it was something I was doing for different reasons where like covering up pain and anxiety. It wasn't that, it was other stuff. And I just quit. Like there was one day I did it, and the next day I never did it again. And but all of that, those first 2 years really made a foundation of the person I became later. It was very difficult to outgrow that reputation I had built when I came back to Southern. But it really gave me perspective, and it gave me determination. It brought me back to my conviction. I was supposed to be a youth pastor and all this kind of stuff. But I still, to this day, think it was probably not 100% required, but I think it was necessary for me to go through that, to become, on the other side, to be the person I was going to need to be for the next coming years, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we can kind of wrap it up. Basically, the detours, that path of the valley of the shadow of death, that seems like, well, one, we wouldn't even want to be there. Yeah. It's an opportunity that Jesus takes. Well, he takes that opportunity to call us into a deeper relationship with him. And so the whole thing is are we going to take him up on that? Or are we going to say, no thanks, and be like Brett's dad and drive through the barriers? Or like that other guy who just, yes, he was in a hurry and going to pass these people and ended up in the cement and was so far behind the others. Yeah. The others were, light turned green and they went, and he was stuck sitting there until, help arrived, basically. So.
Oh, that was the rap.
That was the rap, yes.
So, I thought this part. So the detour is the path of the valley of the shadow of death. It's an opportunity for Jesus to call us into a deeper relationship with him. We're going to take him up on that, because that is what I thought was her best, most powerful point. Like you said, do you not and get stuck in the tar, or do you take that adventurous journey that Jesus is leading on, no matter where you think of it is? Like, this is a detour, is it? No. This is the path of righteousness through the valley of shadow of death, where God still has that cup overflowing to give us as we walk that path.
Right, and remember we talked about the cup overflowing isn't just all these good things that God does for us. It is the opportunity, like Jesus had there in the Garden of Gethsemane, to die to self, and then to do the will of God. And that's the most beautiful thing that he can do for us.
Mm-hmm. The deeper relationship with him.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go.
There you go. Another week.
Another week, and we're still here. Because diabetes sucks, but that's another story.
Off topic.
Off topic, so. All right, so thanks for joining us. I hope it's a little cooler where you're at. It's 152 here. And I just stand there and water the plants, and I pour sweat. I could have watered the plants with my sweat. It was just, that bad. But yes, we will be back, because apparently nothing stops us. If this was one weekend not to broadcast, because so much is going on, it would have been it. But here we are. We made it work. Put it together, and with string, duct tape, and
a mic that I had to shout. Shout. Yes, I'm shouting right now. By the way,
yeah, this is her shout.
In case you can't tell, I'm shouting.
Yes, and Anyway, so have a great rest of your Sabbath. A great week